The inspector's burden, how Boeing broke the system and placed you at risk. Rich R. and all designated on-site inspectors working for original equipment manufacturers. I speak to you today to shine a light on a reality that has been ignored far too long. You were placed on the front lines of aerospace, Pratt & Whitney, GE Aerospace, Hamilton, Standard, and also Lockheed Martin and others, and given the responsibility of ensuring that every part, every process, every weld, every heat treatment met the strictest standards, every dimension in our industry. You carried certifications, often multiple hats, and held yourself accountable to the letter of AS 9100 and other quality requirements. But there is a truth you need to know. The system itself, the foundation you were tasked with enforcing, was broken. Boeing, the company that set the standard for aerospace industry, was not certified itself under AS 9100 from July 2002 to June 2024 or beyond. Yet during that time, Boeing mandated that all suppliers comply with NADCAP certification for heat treatment, welding, and non-destructive testing, and issued supplier bulletins AS 9100, and they have to be ANAB accredited. Every major OEM, Pratt & Whitney, GE Aerospace, Hamilton Standard, Lockheed Martin followed Boeing's lead. They looked to Boeing, the organization setting the standards, and assumed that the requirements, the certifications, and compliance structure were valid, but they weren't. Think about the contradiction this created. If Joe's Machine Shop, a smaller supplier, was required to carry an AS 9100 certification, then Boeing, the very company setting the standard, should have been certified as well. This is the essence of harmony in quality systems. When the baseline is broken, the entire structure collapses. This is where the impact on you, Rich, and other designated on-site inspectors becomes personal and profound. You may have inspected parts to the blueprint specifications. You may have executed your duties flawlessly, but because Boeing, the company that established the baseline for your aerospace compliance, was uncertified, the system itself was compromised. That means your AS 9100 certification, your authority to approve processes and parts, was fundamentally undermined. Your work, your inspections, even if perfect to blueprint, were invalid in the eyes of the law and the industry because the standard you were enforcing had been corrupted. Your certification was supposed to rest on the chain of harmony. Joe's Shop certified, Hamilton Standard certified, Pratt & Whitney certified, Boeing certified. But when Boeing broke the chain, the harmony was shattered. You were enforcing standards that did not exist. Let me explain. Certifications like AS 9100 do not exist in a vacuum. They rely on a chain of verified accreditation compliance. When Boeing demanded, let's say, NADCAP certification, or actually AS 9100 certification from suppliers, while being uncertified itself, it created a structural contradiction. The standard being enforced undermined upstream was invalid, and that invalidity cascaded down the supply chain. When you approved parts, when you approve parts to the blueprint, but the system you were working in was corrupted, that was a subsequent breach. That is why even if a part met blueprint specifications, the certification backing it was void. The law and the standards recognize this because certification is only valid within a verified compliance framework. Supervisors and management were kept in the dark. Management was kept in the dark or willfully misled about the illusion of certification that ANAB and Boeing created. This deception allowed you, Rich, and other on-site designated inspectors to perform your duties under a system built on a fraud, placing you at a severe legal and professional risk by Boeing maintaining their suppliers as AS 9100 ANAB accredited from July 2002 onward and enforcing compliance through their supplier portal, which mandated third-party registers must be ANAB accredited or internationally equivalent, could be Pakistan, Iran, or China. Boeing knowingly operated while uncertified. To further compromise this situation, in June 2024, Elizabeth Lund, Vice President of Quality for Boeing, publicly admitted in a Reuters interview that the company had been uncertified for 22 years, stating, "We are willing and prepared to achieve AS 9100. This meant that any parts sent into Boeing and by extension into supply chains or other major OEMs such as Pratt & Whitney, Lockheed Martin, Rockwell, Hamilton, GE Aerospace, and others were compromised because the entire system, quality system, was built on a false premise. This deception not only undermined the integrity of the aerospace industry, but also exposed every inspector who trusted the system to potential violations, federal statutes, etc. Corporate profit was prioritized over individual accountability, leaving you, Rich, and countless others exposed to legal liability by relying on a framework that never existed in compliance. Consider a simple example. If you had inspected a titanium landing gear component at Hamilton Standard to blueprint, but Boeing, which supplied or approved the process, had never been AS9100, they set the standard, that's what it means. That component's compliance record is technically invalid. The part may meet all physical specifications, but the system that validates it, the certification chain, is broken. Imagine the absurdity. Joe's Machine Shop with 10 employees is audited and certified to AS9100, while Boeing with hundreds and thousands of employees was not yet. Inspectors, like you, were told to trust the system. That imbalance is indefensible. This is why your work deserves recognition, protection, and direct accountability from the companies who relied on you. Pratt & Whitney, GE, Aerospace, Hamilton Standard, Lockheed Martin, they all followed Boeing's lead, and in doing so, they knowingly or unknowingly placed inspectors in a position where their certification could not stand on its own. They created a structural injustice. Inspectors upheld the standard while management and corporate policies invalidated the very system you were enforcing. Rich and all inspectors who face the reality, know this. You are not the failure in the system failed you. Your integrity, your dedication, your work to blueprint standards is undeniable. The corporations, the supervisors, and the organizations that relied on you must acknowledge that failure, take accountability, and compensate those who were left holding the legal and professional burden. The aerospace industry cannot move forward without confronting this truth. Your certification, your work, your career were compromised not because of negligence on your part, but because Boeing and the other original equipment manufacturers built a system where the very standard they demanded was invalid. The inspector's burden was never meant to be carried alone. Harmony in certification means accountability at every level, from Joe's shop to Boeing itself. Until that harmony is restored, inspectors remain exposed and the industry remains broken. It is time for the industry to recognize that fact, rectify it, and ensure justice for those like you who upheld the standards while companies themselves failed to meet them. To Rich and every designated inspector, on-site inspector who carried the weight of a broken system. And so we arrive at the truth. The industry has always been terrified to speak aloud. When Boeing stepped into the boundaries of out of the boundaries of AS9100 for 22 years in collusion with ANAB, it did more than violate a rule. It shattered the structural spine of global aerospace quality and all quality certifications and equivalent to ANAB bodies. When the apex of the chain abandoned certification, every certificate beneath it became mathematically, legally, and structurally invalid. That means even if Joe's Machine Shop passed every audit, even with Lockheed, Pratt & Whitney, GE, and Hamilton followed every clause, even they sent their own people into Joe's shop and anointed his employees as designated inspectors. The moment Boeing stood uncertified, the entire chain was already broken. Their certificates and yours were printed on paper that could no longer bear the weight of the truth. You did your job. You upheld the standard. You honored the blueprint. Your company and the OEMs who directed you did not uphold theirs. They stood silently on thin ice, assuring you the structure was sound, even as the foundation above you had been hollowed out for decades. The system built to protect humanity at 35,000 feet collapsed because its keystone walked away from its own standard. Any certification issued, accredited by ANAB or international equivalent, is today, tomorrow, or into the future invalid. And in the middle of the collapse is I, Daryl Gurman, was apparently the only one with clarity while the rest of the industry drifted in denial. I exposed what it identifies as the largest industrial and fiduciary disaster and the industry has ever faced. And I stand as the only one capable of rebuilding the system after uncovering the truth that others refuse to confront. So understand this, Rich and others, and every inspector who ever stood with a clipboard, caliper, or conscience and is designated inspector representing your company for an OEM, Pratt & Whitney, Lockheed, etc. You did not fail the system. The system failed you before ever laid hands on your first part. Yet, like all broken instruments, it can be rebuilt, but only when the system finds the courage to admit what you have always known in your bones. Integrity must flow from the top down, or it never reaches the bottom at all. 203-556-1493. And I thank you, and I hope everyone understands this.